acting all high and mighty over pocket change. Ugh. Those were the words thrown at me after I had arranged $30,000 for my eldest son and his wife's liver transplant. I couldn't believe she'd say something like this to me, and this was money they'd asked to borrow. The wife of the man getting the surgery seemed to revel in my reaction, smirking at me after spitting out those awful words. My patience quickly reached its limit. If this is who they are, then spending my money on them? I took my money back and walked out of the hospital room. I am Keely, a housewife who just turned 72 this spring. My husband passed away 3 years ago, and I've been living alone since then. My son Nick is 43 this year. He's married, has his own family, and is financially independent. I'm living quietly alone in the countryside, relying on my late husband's pension. I'm used to the rural life, but sometimes it gets a little lonely at this age. I've asked Nick to visit when he has time, but he's often too busy with work to make it. I even suggested that just his wife Ellie could visit, but she's also busy, she says. Ellie doesn't work. She's a stay-at-home wife. I would think she has time, but every time I reach out, she claims to be busy. Recently, I found out that Ellie's busy is an outright lie. My eldest son and his wife live in an apartment about a 10-minute walk from Ellie's family home. Apparently, Ellie spends most of her days at her family home. I even heard from Nick that she often stays overnight there. As a mother, I really want her to take proper care of Nick, her husband. But that single thought feels like it could escalate into a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict. So I keep it to myself. Nick, you need to manage your wife better. I feel like Ellie has a bit of control over my son, and Nick is completely smitten with her. He seems to excuse everything she does. Even during New Year's, they don't visit, which makes me think Ellie is intentionally avoiding this place. I'm concerned, but I also don't want to stir up trouble between them. So I've decided to hold my tongue. At this time, I was still thinking that as long as I keep quiet, everything would be fine. This is how our distant relationship was, until a sudden event changed everything. I heard that Ellie got sick and had to be hospitalized. It turns out her condition is serious, and she needs surgery, according to Nick. Although I don't know much about the illness, she apparently needs a liver transplant. Hearing liver transplant, my voice left me. I can't help but worry about how hard it must be for Ellie. Liver transplants aren't only expensive, but they also require a donor. I'll visit her. Planning to visit her as soon as the next day, I told Nick. However, he quickly said, "You don't have to come." He explained that she had just been admitted and wasn't settled yet. Rather, there's something I want to ask you. Nick said that first. It's been a long time since my son asked me for a favor. I listened, wondering what it was, and it turned out to be about the surgical expenses. Apparently, the liver transplant surgery, post-op treatment, and hospitalization will cost close to $30,000. Sure, $30,000 is a lot of money. However, I know that my son earns a better-than-average salary. On top of that, they don't have children. I assumed they would have saved up that much by now. You can afford it, can't you? You guys don't have any savings? We just bought a new apartment, so our savings are depleted. He hesitates as he says it. I had no idea they had moved into a new apartment. I was shocked to learn about this for the first time today. It's unbelievable that they changed their address and didn't even tell me, their own mother. What? You moved? Bought an apartment? Why am I hearing about this now? What were you thinking? I couldn't help but raise my voice. My son quickly says, "We've been busy, and I meant to tell you." But I think he deliberately kept it from me. Maybe he thought I'd visit if he told me they bought a new place. I'm not feeling great about this. And yet, turning down my son's request is also difficult. I let out a small sigh. Will $30,000 cover it? I have a nest egg from when my husband was still alive, and my survivor benefits are more than enough for me to live on alone. It's enough. Sorry, Mom. Alright, I'll bring it over this weekend. At my words, Nick visibly relaxes. He must have been really desperate, but I wonder why he didn't consult with Ellie's parents first, given that he's always hanging out there. My son might not have wanted to consult his in-laws. I have various thoughts, but for now, I want Ellie to recover after the surgery. That's all I was genuinely thinking. Although it might sound presumptuous, I was thinking, if this $30,000 saves Ellie, I went to see my son and his wife for the first time in a long time over the weekend. I thought it best to bring the money directly to the hospital where Ellie is staying, so I arranged to meet Nick there. Even after informing him that I had arrived at the hospital, Nick took a while to show up. I waited for about 15 minutes. "Did you bring it?" That was the first thing he said when he finally appeared. I thought there would be more to say, but I guess the situation was just that urgent. As I handed over the bag containing $30,000, Nick snatched it from my hands. Quickly confirming its contents, he said, "You can go home now." What? I was taken aback. His attitude, essentially telling me to leave after handing over the money, was irritating, even for me. Even if he's worried about Ellie's condition, this is no excuse for such rudeness. I guess my displeasure showed up on my face. Nick looked at me and clicked his tongue. "What's the big deal? We're going through a lot here. Don't expect anything in return." Nick looked at me and clicked his tongue, yelling at me out of nowhere. I'd never been yelled at by my son before. He was always such an obedient child. I stared at him in disbelief. Ever since Ellie became his wife, it feels like his personality has changed. The Nick glaring at me with an intense expression was someone I didn't recognize. What's with this attitude toward your mother? Although I thought it was embarrassing to have a family argument in the hospital lobby, this was something I couldn't overlook. If I didn't correct my son here, I felt it would lead to something terrible. But it seemed like my anger didn't affect Nick at all. He snickered and turned his back on me. I thought about chasing after him, but feeling his complete rejection, I lost the will to do so. There was nothing more I could do. I decided to leave and headed for the exit. Just then, a woman said to me, "Oh, it's been a long time." Seeing her face, I snapped back to reality. It was Ellie's mother, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. Hurriedly, I bowed and said, "It's been a while." She was probably here to visit someone in the town hospital. I told Ellie's mother, "I came to visit, but can't find the room." She cheerfully said, "Well then, let's go together." Despite her daughter being in the hospital, she remained incredibly upbeat. The room Ellie was in turned out to be a private room. Apparently, she had insisted on having a private room. I was even more surprised it was a special room. It seemed extravagant, considering they were complaining about not having enough for the transplant and treatment costs. I knocked, and right away, Nick's voice answered. When Ellie's mother opened the door, I saw my son and his wife smiling warmly. A smile they never showed me, but had for Ellie's mother, making my heart ache just a bit. Ellie, sitting up in bed, noticed me standing behind her mother right away. Immediately, a frown formed on her face. "Oh, so your mother-in-law is here too, huh?" The careless way she looked at me was like I was something unpleasant. There's a bag of cash on the bedside table, the one I just gave to Nick. $30,000 is a lot of money. Leaving it there like that almost makes me dizzy. "Mom, you're still here? Haven't you taken care of everything already?" Nick spoke to me with a tone that was almost spitting the words out. I don't understand why I'm being treated this way. Ellie's mother doesn't seem too bothered by Nick's attitude. She just smiles. I bumped into Ellie's mother. I was about to leave, but she invited me to visit. Ignoring Nick's rude behavior, I responded. I thought it best to pretend not to notice and let it go. Encouraged by Ellie's mother, I sit in the round chair and start asking Ellie about her health and how she's feeling. Ellie, reluctantly perhaps, but unable to mistreat me in front of her mother, explains her medical condition. Turns out they found a donor for her liver transplant rather quickly. It's a cousin of Ellie's, apparently. If the transplant is successful, she'll recover her health. Enough already. Can you leave? My son clearly can't stand me being here. His leg shakes in what seems like frustration or anger. His attitude is getting to me. Your wife is sick, you know. It's natural for me to be concerned. Why are you acting this way? I brought what you asked for all the way here. Don't you think you owe me at least a thank you? At my words, Nick's face turns red. Ellie snickers at me from her bed, as if making fun of me. Acting all high and mighty over chump change. It's a turnoff to be lectured like this. I'm stunned by the words hurled at me from Ellie. Nick really has changed. Ellie's mother being here doesn't matter to him anymore. Chump change? $30,000 is chump change to you? You too couldn't come up with it, could you? How dare you insult me? And that attitude. Can't you do something about it? It's just rude. I can't help but stand up from my chair. The eldest son and his wife show no signs of being fazed. What kind of people are they? Really? It's beyond infuriating. It's baffling. Ellie's mother is just standing there, smiling and saying, "Oh dear." Maybe she's just clueless, but I think she's also a bit out of touch with reality. The eldest son and his wife continue to call me stingy and a penny pincher. If I just listen in silence, they'll say whatever they want, even digging up things from the past. I take a deep breath. I see. I get it. I was the one who was wrong. Nick stops hurling insults upon hearing my apology. However, his face still sports a smug, disdainful smile. Quickly, I reach behind Nick and grab the paper bag casually placed on the bedside table. It still contains the $30,000 I brought. Heavy to me, but clearly pocket change to them. Nick hastily tries to snatch the bag from me. Not anymore. But I've decided I can't hand it over. What are you doing? Give it back! That's our money! I glance at Nick, who's yelling at me, and carefully tuck the paper bag into my purse. Then I give them both a piercing look. Ellie, in her laid-back manner, says, "I can't have that surgery without that money, you know." At her words, Nick starts to panic. It really is clear she has the upper hand. Ellie's mother casually comments, "Well, that's a problem, isn't it? It's just money, right? Figure it out yourselves. Do you think I'm going to lend such a sum after being treated like this? I'm leaving." I declare to my son that I won't be lending the money. Ellie's mother then turns to my son, smiling. "What will you do? Your wife is in a tight spot." But her eyes aren't smiling. Nick's face pales in an instant. Seizing the moment, I rush out of the hospital room. I quickly jump into the elevator that had just arrived and make my way from the lobby to a taxi. I catch a glimpse of Nick running after me through the taxi's rearview mirror, but I don't care. Feeling utterly frustrated, I head back to my own home. Once home, I stare at the $30,000 I'd left on the table for a while. Then I replay today's events at the hospital in my head from start to finish. No matter how I look at it, I can't see where I went wrong. At one point, I even think about just blowing all of the $30,000 on some lavish spree. I decide to call my younger sister and her husband, who live nearby. "Hey, how about coming over for dinner tomorrow? Bring the grandkids and the nephews. I'm always alone here, so the more the merrier." My sister and her husband are thrilled at the invitation. They say they'll bring their son, his spouse, and the grandchildren. After hearing my sister's response, I quickly contact a high-end steak restaurant and a catering service. I apologize for the short notice and ask if they can accommodate. Both are more than happy to oblige. It's good to have a long-standing relationship with businesses that can be flexible when you need it. I've already requested kids' menus from the caterer, so the little ones can eat too. The next day is incredibly busy right from the morning. Thinking we'll need some sweets after dinner, I go out to buy cakes and donuts. While I'm at it, I also get gifts from my nephew's family and my sister's family, who frequently come to visit. And for my niece and nephew and sister and her husband, who always make time to visit. I prepared gifts for them as well. I buy gaming consoles for the kids, high-end fountain pens for my brother-in-law and nephew, and matching designer bags for my sister and my nephew's wife. Once everything is set, I feel like I really accomplished something. The whole ordeal with my son's liver transplant has completely slipped my mind. As I'm just waiting for everyone to arrive, I casually check my phone and see back-to-back calls from Nick and Ellie. I'm immediately annoyed, wondering what they could possibly want now. There are also text messages, so I check them. The first batch of texts are complaints about me not paying for the medical expenses. But as I read on, the messages turn into nothing but whining. By the end, they're downright begging. I sighed and called Nick on his cell phone. Surprisingly, he answered after just one ring. "Mom, why have you been ignoring my calls?" I was stunned to hear that as the first thing out of his mouth. "Really, Nick? You're the one who usually ignores my calls, you know." As we spoke, the events of yesterday flashed back into my mind, making it hard to contain my irritation. "When are you bringing me the $30,000? I'm in trouble here since you took it back yesterday." I was disappointed and saddened by my son's consistently aggressive attitude. I wondered when he'd changed so much from the sweet, considerate child he once was. While I remained silent, Nick started berating me again. By the second time, I found myself listening more calmly. Besides, the things Nick was saying sounded like childish complaints. All you do is call me stingy and say you're not fulfilling your role as a mother-in-law. None of it resonates with me. I felt indifferent just listening to him. I heard all that yesterday. Why don't you accept help from Ellie's parents instead? You're close with them, aren't you? Plus, Ellie isn't their biological daughter. I'm sure they'll help. I interrupted Nick's ongoing tirade. If I didn't, it seemed like it would never end. I was also becoming suspicious of Ellie's mother, who was just smiling in the hospital room yesterday. Think about my situation too! People will say I can't even afford my wife's treatment. You're the one who called it pocket change, right? And for the record, I used that money. There's hardly anything left. Nick was left speechless on the other end of the line. He reacted to the news that there was little money left. Why did he treat me like that, when he's clearly desperate? I couldn't help but wonder. Just sort out the liver transplant fees on your own. Don't involve us. I made myself very clear. Please, relay that to your wife as well. I cut off the call, feeling like I had just tossed out a parting shot. I didn't want my emotions to get the best of me. Even if he's rotten, he's still my son. As a parent, I want to help him. But his attitude yesterday was unforgivable. If both of them had apologized, maybe I would have reconsidered. But there was no apology at all. This makes it impossible to forgive them. Just after hanging up with Nick, I got a call from Ellie. I pick up the phone, ready to settle this once and for all. Mother-in-law, this is terrible. My life is on the line. Do you understand that? As soon as I pick up, her condescending tone irritates me. If her life is on the line, she should be more humble. I told Nick too. Instead of borrowing money from me, wouldn't it be simpler for your parents to help you out, Ellie? I tell Ellie the same thing I told Nick. Ellie scoffs at my suggestion. Seems like she really can't humble herself before others. Then she starts talking about how if I don't lend them $30,000, Nick will be in a bad position. Basically, she's saying she doesn't care if Nick becomes uncomfortable at her parents' house. Honestly, what she's saying almost feels like blackmail. Listen, Ellie, I'll make it clear today. I don't know why you're avoiding me. You didn't even tell us about moving to the new house, and you never visit. I don't feel like you're really part of our family. Ellie listens in silence. I don't want to say this, but can you really call yourself a daughter-in-law? You only reach out when it's convenient for you, and then you greet me with this disrespectful attitude. I don't want to hear your old-fashioned views on daughter-in-law and mother-in-law relationships right now. Just bring the money for the treatment, okay? Ellie has a short temper and gets very angry. She yelled at me over the phone. The angrier Ellie gets, the calmer I become. Raising your voice won't help. Besides, that money is already spent, and there's not much left. It may be pocket change to you, but it matters to me. Ellie gasps at the mention of the dwindling funds. I guess spouses do become alike when they spend a lot of time together. Then what should I do? We found a donor! All we need to do is make the payment! We're running out of time! Her last words were almost a scream. Hearing her, I felt no inclination to help. Figure it out yourselves. Ask your parents or something. They may lower their heads for you, even if I won't. I'll pray for a successful surgery from here. I hung up after saying that. Several more calls came in from both of them, but I ignored all. By evening, they seemed to give up, and the texts and calls ceased. Later, Ellie's father came to apologize to me. I was surprised by his sudden visit, but he was a sensible man, and apologized sincerely. After his apology, I agreed to lend the money for the treatment. Ellie and her mother seem to be extreme spendthrifts. Both spend money freely, while Nick is working non-stop. Lack of savings wasn't just due to the apartment purchase, it appears. They've promised to pay back the medical expenses gradually. They are also in debt to multiple other parties, and seem to be in a tight spot. But the surgery was successful, so I'll wait for them to get back on their feet and pay me back. Their relationship as a married couple seems to be on the rocks due to money issues. They have shared debts and can't afford a divorce, so they continue to live separately within the same home. Nick informed me they will divorce once the debts are paid off. I've decided to do a major renovation on the house where I now live alone. The suggestion came from the nephew and his wife who had invited me to that lavish dinner that day. Since then, they have visited me like real sons would, and the house is lively with the sound of kids on the weekends. Living alone doesn't feel lonely anymore, and I believe the $30,000 I spent that day was well worth it.